Okay, good evening everybody. Oh, sorry, is that a bit loud? Move that down a bit. Good evening everybody. Welcome to today's meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. And also welcome to Ben Sim from the County Highways people. The first item on the agenda is the evacuation procedure. If I run that through people, is we're not expecting any fire drills to go off. So if the alarms do go off, please exit the building. Obviously, just both side doors of the chamber, down the main staircase, and meet across the road by the Yorkshire Bank. Please don't try and use the lifts. And if anybody needs any assistance, give us a shout. We'll make sure that's there. It's also a good time to remind people to switch your phones off or put them on silent. And also to say that, as is the practice with the council now, the meeting is being recorded and it normally goes out on YouTube a couple of days after the meeting. And I also notice a member of the public videoing the proceedings as well. Item number 2 is to receive apologies. I believe we've had apologies from Councillor Shepherd and Councillor Tandy is the substitute. Yes?
And also apologies from Councillor Long.
That takes us on to item number 3, which is to confirm the minutes of the meeting on the 1st of October. Are you happy that I sign those? Thank you. And item number 4 is any declarations of disclosable pecuniary and other interests in accordance with the Members' Code of Conduct. Councillor Tandy.
Junior interest in item 1 of the planning applications of my daughter is an employee of North Yorkshire College.
Item number 5 is declarations of contact. I think all members have been contacted by Councillor Condacor, County Councillor Jeff Clark and Mr Jim Foster. Yeah? I don't know whether there's any extras. Councillor Wilson. Oh, sorry.
Those representations you've mentioned by email, I should state for the record that I have had telephone conversations with Mr Foster and County Councillor Clark, but I have given no indication as to how I intend to vote tonight.
Councillor Panda.
Item number 4 is my residence where I live, at 29 Mercy Meadow. And I will leave the room when it comes at the end of the meeting, like when I'm going to discuss. And I haven't spoken to any councillor about my application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, but that should have... Councillor Grant.
But like Councillor Wilson, I didn't disclose which way I'd vote on the application.
In which case it takes us on to agenda item 6, that's applications for planning permission where the public have indicated a desire to speak. If I just run through that for you so that you know that procedure. The officer will present the report to us. Following on from that, I will take the speakers in the order that I've got them on here. And just for members' information, on item number 3, there's an extra speaker, Mr John Watts. Under the Constitution, the speakers are allowed 3 minutes. Once the egg timer goes off, I will stop you from speaking. That's just so that I'm fair to everybody. However, members of the committee then have an opportunity to ask for any points of clarification. It can only be to clarify anything that's been said during your 3 minutes. Again, following on from that, the officers may wish to make any comments that have arisen out of what's been said. And then once something's been moved and seconded, that will mean that the committee can debate the matter and hopefully reach a decision. In the vast majority of cases, we do make the decision on the day, but on occasion, we do defer items for either for a site visit or for more information, things like that. But generally speaking, we make the decision on the day. Everybody pretty much clear on that, yeah? Right. Okay, so that takes us on to the first item then, which is North Warwickshire and South Leicester College. Claire?
This is an outline application for the erection of up to 195 dwellings, a new 3G pitch and public open space and landscaping. Access is also being considered at this stage. Neighbour objections have been received as detailed on the agenda and addendum, raising issues such as a loss of a college facility, impact on highway safety, there is no demand for additional housing, impact on facilities such as schools and doctors, impact on ecology, visual amenity, noise, loss of playing fields and the impact on residential amenity. Notwithstanding the level of objection received, the application is also being reported to committee at the request of Councillor Condacore. Letters of support have also been received on the grounds that it would be an opportunity to improve educational facilities and would be of benefit to the college, area and students. In terms of the principle of residential development, the land is not designated for any specific land use in the adopted borough plan, meaning that there is no specific restriction on this land in regard to a residential use. Sites which are not allocated within a plan but come forward within the plan period are called windfall sites. The borough plan is reliant on a number of larger sites which are historically slow to start and may have a slower build-out rate. The proposed sites could offer additional flexibility in supply by delivering homes to residents early in the plan period. Some of the site is previously developed and therefore brownfield land, which is supported in the MPPF.
Excuse me, could you slow down a little bit? It's very difficult to hear.
Yeah, if you couldn't... Right. If you're able to do that, Claire, just a bit.
We can't see our faces.
Okay, well, okay, all right.
The proposal will provide 25% affordable housing in compliance with borough plan policy. The proposal would lead to a loss of playing pitches. This issue will be dealt with later in my presentation. The actual college use will not cease, and merely some of the land used by the college will be given over to the development. It is therefore considered that the principle of development is considered acceptable. In relation to visual amenity, as it is an outline application, there are no details of layout, scale or appearance of the dwellings. An indicative layout, as shown on the screen, showing how the site could be developed, has been submitted, but this is not being considered as part of the application. Given the site is surrounded by residential properties, it is not considered that residential development would appear out of character. The detailed design, however, would be considered at the reserve matters stage. In terms of residential amenity, the indicative master plan shows it is possible to develop the site and maintain distance standards as set out in the Council's residential design guide. Again, this would be considered further at the detailed reserve matters stage. Environmental health do not have any concerns regarding road traffic noise and the impact on residential amenity. A noise assessment has been submitted with the application, which states that acceptable internal and external noise levels due to the sports pitch can be achieved, but they suggest that gardens are away from the pitch behind the proposed buildings and suitable fencing around the pitch is provided. The layout would be considered as part of the reserved matters.
So, no. The officer's presenting a report. Thank you. Go on, Claire.
Thank you. Environmental Health have requested that there is a robust boundary treatment around the sports pitch to mitigate noise. Condition 8 on the agenda and addendum has been added further, requesting further details of fencing around the pitch. In relation to ecology, an ecological appraisal has been submitted with the application. The Council's Parks Department have no objection to the scheme, providing that conditions are attached which reflect the recommendations of the ecological report. These include the requirement for the submission of a construction ecological management plan and a biodiversity enhancement plan, which are included as conditions 10 and 11. In terms of biodiversity, the mitigation hierarchy should be applied where relevant, which follows the order of avoid, minimise, restore and offset. Given that the site is a school with buildings, hard standing and playing field, it could be argued that what is habitat currently and what the development could provide means the impact can be minimised. Neither the Council's Parks Department nor Warwickshire Wildlife Trust have raised this as an issue. An air quality assessment has been submitted with the application. The pollutant of concern in the area is nitrogen dioxide, as this is the basis for the Council's air quality management area declarations, but also other particulates to a lesser extent. The conclusion of the report states that there will be no air quality concerns for the homes within the development itself, and it would not cause significant adverse air quality effects elsewhere. Environmental Health have scrutinised the report and find it to be robust and agree with the report's conclusion. They have recommended some conditions which are included on the agenda and addendum. With regards to flooding, the site is located in flood zone 1, which is considered suitable for all land uses and means whilst the Environment Agency were consulted, they made no response. This complies with policy NE4 in the Borough Plan, which requires that development be prioritised to areas within lowest flood risk. The County Flood Risk Team were consulted with regard to surface water drainage and requested some additional details. These have now been submitted by the applicant, and the County Flood Risk Team have confirmed they have no objections subject to conditions as detailed on the addendum. In terms of access, the existing access arrangement is an access only on Hinkley Road and egress out onto Higham Lane. It is proposed to widen the Hinkley Road access point and make it two-way, therefore providing an additional egress point to the existing facility on Higham Lane. A transport assessment has been submitted and a Stage 1 road safety audit has been carried out. County Highways consider that the proposed access arrangements can be accommodated without having a negative or detrimental impact on the safe and efficient operation of the highway network. There would be an impact on the A444 Leicester Road, Hinkley Road junction, and Highways have requested £644,475 towards highway capacity improvements at this junction. The site is also considered to be in a sustainable location. County Highways have requested contributions to existing infrastructure, including £100,000 towards improvements to cycling and pedestrian infrastructure between the site, railway station and the town centre, and £50,000 towards public transport infrastructure on Higham Lane. County Highways have also requested conditions covering a construction management plan, detailed technical drawings, a travel plan and a parking management strategy, which are included on the agenda. The proposals would lead to a loss of an existing playing pitch. Policy HS4 of the Borough Plan states that proposals for development which would lead to the loss of community facilities will only be permitted where adequate alternative facilities and services are available, or access to locally alternative facilities are enhanced, or there are replacement facilities nearby. When considering the loss of the playing pitches, it is important to appreciate that a new all-weather pitch is being provided to help compensate for the loss of the pitches. The planning statement submitted with the application states that the new provision of the new all-weather pitch will offer significantly greater capacity than the existing grass pitches and therefore enable the opportunity for greater public use than is the case with the existing pitches, and provide local sports teams with the opportunity to train throughout the winter months. Provision of the all-weather pitch is in line with the vision and strategy set out in the Council's Playing Pitch strategy of 2016 and would meet current demand in the ward for such a facility. Sport England have been consulted on the scheme and have responded with no objection to the loss of the pitches and the new all-weather pitch subject to conditions. Overall, it is considered that the loss of the pitches on the site is mitigated somewhat by the addition of the all-weather pitch, and this is especially so given the greater public use throughout the winter months when grass pitches can sometimes become unusable. In terms of planning obligations, requests have been received from Parks, the County Infrastructure Team, Sports Development, the NHS, Police, County Highways, Sport England and George Eliot Hospital, which the applicant has agreed to pay. They have agreed in principle to pay those requested from Sports Development and George Eliot Hospital, and discussions are ongoing to the final amount. Requests have also been made from county footpaths, Warwickshire County Council libraries and for bus stop provision, which are not considered to be SIL compliant. The Council has received notification from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government that the Secretary of State directs the Council not to grant permission without specific authorisation. This is to enable him to consider whether he should call in the application for determination. This direction, however, does not prevent the Council from considering the application. If members are minded to approve the application, it could potentially be called in. The recommendation is therefore approval, subject to conditions and the completion of a legal agreement as detailed on the agenda and addendum.
Okay, thank you, Claire. You have to excuse me, my throat's a bit... just before I move on to the speakers, there's a few people standing up. There are some seats if you want to squeeze in by the councillors. If you want to sit down, it's not as far to throw anything at them either. So if you... okay, so if we go on to our first speaker, it's Councillor Tromans.
Chair, the college, or rather Midlands Academy Trust that controls it, do not have to do this. We don't see every other school and college selling off their sites. Whatever further education funding might have been, it's getting substantial increases in cash from government now, 400 million extra announced just a couple of months ago. The Met has a track record of crying wolf and ignoring advice and also the views of local residents. Previously, it claimed it had to bring in parking charges and barriers to raise money to be able to continue. But as predicted, the whole exercise was a disaster, causing massive displaced parking problems in the area around the college and no meaningful funds raised. Yet the college continued. If this MAT is not able to run the college properly for the benefit of local residents and this borough, then perhaps another entity should run it. At a time when many thousands of new homes are being built in the area around the college and over 15,000 are set to be built across the borough, the college should be looking to expand its offering to meet the increasing local demand, not reduce it. To allow this application would result in the loss of much of the college site, resigning it to just a rump with no room left to ever expand back to current levels, much less the increased levels of demand coming out of our growing population. The application represents a disaster for strategic planning for the area, our borough, and to the provision of post-16 education locally. And for what? So that a troubled multi-academy trust can bail itself out the easy way, selling off our college, our irreplaceable community asset. And with the residual money, most of it, going elsewhere, maybe to South Wigston College, its primary site. Over and above all of this, there are solid planning reasons why this application should be rejected. Firstly, it is not in HSG1, the area outlined for development in the borough plan, nor are the numbers needed numbers required to meet the target for the borough plan. We've heard about windfall sites, but we already have windfall sites. So this would be extra houses on top of all of that in an area that has already been overdeveloped and is struggling with lack of school places, lack of doctors' places, road congestion. We are feeling the strain in the area. And passing this would just make a mockery of the borough plan that's in place. Either we have a borough plan that stands for something that shows the areas where development's permitted, or we don't. It's either a borough plan or it's a sham. Thirdly, there's highway safety and capacity. Whilst the long-running highways objections from Warwickshire County Council might have just about been met, it's clear from the correspondence that this was marginal. Indeed, the portfolio holder for highways has personally written objecting, saying whilst the latest changes and layouts of data from the applicant might technically meet requirements, it's not desirable, particularly
Are there any points of clarification? No. Jim Foster. Sometimes.
This is called a windfall site in the report, yet 3 major developments have been rejected following the government inspector's approval with the recommendation that there should be no further development in the area around this place. The land is not designated for any specific land use in the adopted borough plan, meaning that there is no specific restriction on the land, but there is already the well-used football pitch. I know that from the many panes of glass in the old days that used to break my greenhouses at the back there, some 40 years ago. And the student visitors, the student car parking is being built on. Unbelievable. Many of the complaints are from residents who have lived in the area surrounding the college 50 years or more and do not understand the new poor regulations which were introduced a few years ago to address the housing shortage in the country. The very small distance allowance between existing and new buildings is always a major issue to people. Some of the properties have rear gates leading into the college area for access to the main Incley Road from many years ago, and this seems to have been dismissed. This application is only about money. Following a Freedom of Information request which I submitted to the college, the failed car parking only raised £8,000 in the first year. Yet I know, because there were staff parking outside my home in protest who offered me the information on what the equipment had cost, and no comment. This has led to 1/3 of the staff and students parking in surrounding streets, especially in 10 homes, including mine, which are very near to the college. Disgraceful, actually, what goes on. I appeared before the government inspector on the 27th of February last year for stage 2 of the borough plan. As the only St Nicholas resident present at that hearing, I submitted information on the fact that a charity, Client Earth, the week before, had taken the government to High Court on air quality issues and won the case. Yesterday I sent reports to planning committee members on the air quality serious issues which are being raised currently to address the restriction of traffic flowing from the south through Coventry. I was asked to actually speak at Coventry University as a retired scientist on that issue.
Thank you, Jim.
Anybody want to hear the rest?
We'd like to, but you've only got points of clarification. Councillor Grant.
Thank you.
Oh, sit down, please, Mr. Foster. That isn't a point of clarification. Don't push things. Maureen Chetwynd. Sorry, I should have explained to, but if you press the big button, that will switch the mic on. But switch it off when you're finished. Thank you.
Long-awaited borough plan, but this development is not included as a designated area for development. Contrary to the Planning Officer's report, item 10, under reasons for approval, these dwellings, including semi-detached and apartments, are not in keeping with the surrounding area, which are mostly detached properties, and there are no apartment blocks around here. We currently have more than enough houses for our needs in our area and do not need more, as the borough plan gives us a more than adequate supply. Neighbouring occupiers would indeed have their living conditions materially harmed by this plan. This development would not be of benefit to our area, which badly needs more educational facilities. Some of the families who would live in these 195 dwellings would no doubt have children, but there are currently no available places for primary school children. This college serves the whole of North Warwickshire, not just Nuneaton, but more and more vocational courses are being transferred to colleges in Leicestershire. Not all children are academic, and the practical courses are essential to maintain a strong supply of well-trained tradespeople. There are no play areas shown in this plan, and the green spaces that are shown are too small for the concentration of dwellings that are planned. The college students, too, will lose their green areas for rest and relaxation. This development would take away the current site of biodiversity at the college, as well as our surroundings that are now giving space for birds, squirrels, bats, etc. But they will suffer when the area is covered in cement and tarmac. The Planning Officer's report states that there would be no risk of flooding, as the new development would be on the same level as existing properties. Our short gardens in Ferndale Close flood every winter, which has necessitated our installing a drainage system to take away the floodwater, as our houses are at a substantially lower level than the field. The committee are welcome to come and see for themselves that our small gardens all slope down towards our houses. This is in spite of the football pitch being permeable land, which must absorb a lot of the rainwater. Around our ward in general, standing water is lying for longer due in part to global warming with the increase in rainfall, but also as more and more of our green spaces disappear under housing developments, there are fewer sites to absorb the water. In the Borough Plan Policy number NE1-4B, we should be restoring a strong landscape structure in the north of Nuneaton, which should improve the habitat connectivity, not destroy it as losing this land would entail. Lastly, if Hinckley Road ingress is turned into an ingress and egress from the site, there comes the added problems of increased air pollution as traffic tries to leave the site onto the busy A47, probably necessitating even more traffic lights as well as more pollution from the new roads on the site. Our air quality is so important, but it does not even seem to be being monitored. Please do not approve this planning application. It is not wanted or needed by your electorate.
Are there any points of clarification? No. Mr. Ray Linforth.
As Chair of the College Board, I want to assure members that our plans to raise funding are to invest in the Nuneaton campus. And they've been robustly considered and are strongly supported by staff and students. The learning environment at our Nuneaton campus is in many ways no longer fit for purpose. I began my own teaching career at what was then the North Warwickshire College of Technology and Art in 1978. And I can tell you that there are significant parts of that campus that have changed very little since those days. The board believes passionately that our Nuneaton-based students deserve the same standard of facilities and the level of opportunity as those based at Hinckley, South Leicestershire and our Myra campuses. While our college finances are now stable, we simply do not have the funds to invest in our buildings. The government has said that it intends to improve further education funding, but the anticipated level of any increase nowhere near addresses the gap created by chronic underfunding over successive years. The housing development we propose is small scale, sustainable, sympathetic, and consists of just 195 homes in an existing urban area. As part of our plans, we pay great attention to improving green travel opportunities, including good cycling and car sharing. Funding from the scheme will enable the refurbishment of the college to achieve high levels of energy efficiency, enabling us to create a more cost-effective campus. At the heart of this development will be a state-of-the-art 3G pitch, a facility that students and our local community will gain great benefit from, both in respect of improving health and lifestyle, but also for recreational purposes. My board has been deeply concerned by recent attempts by some local politicians to spread misinformation in relation to the proposal. For example, Councillor Troman says that the MAT controls North Warwickshire College. Not right, sir. You've got the facts wrong. If you want to come and talk to me, I'll be very happy to do that. Another example is the claim that we will be reducing student numbers by 20%. Absolute tosh. Our present campus is utilised to about 50% of its physical capacity. The proposal in front of you will still enable significant growth in student numbers and will give students the learning environment they deserve. It's been claimed that under this scheme, water tanks will be relocated under existing trees. Again, complete tosh.
Thank you, Mr. Linford. Are there any points of clarification? No. Councillor Wilson.
Oh, sorry.
In your statement, you said that this is a small-scale development. How have you arrived at the conclusion it is small-scale when the Borough Council already has a strategic housing allocation site elsewhere within the borough, which is near enough 200 homes, which isn't that far off what you have said? What is your definition of small-scale?
All of our planning advisors who tell us that a development of this scale is not strategic, it's classified as small-scale.
Marion Plant.
Tonight, I'm extremely proud to lead North Warwickshire and South Leicestershire College. In one form or another, it's served the communities and working people here in Nuneaton and North Warwickshire for over 100 years. Our aim, as you know, is to prepare young people for jobs and careers and to help adults move into work or progress within work. We're passionate that vocational education is valued as highly as A-levels, and we are, as someone said, the only provider of vocational education located in the borough. We currently serve 12,000 students across 5 campuses, including the New Myra Technology Institute, which is a world-class facility for which we secured 9.5 million from the LEP, which added an iconic and leading-edge business into Nuneaton. 4,000 of our students study at our ageing Nuneaton campus, and our numbers continue to grow. That campus includes high-quality specialist provision for students with educational needs and disabilities, pupils excluded from local schools, and most recently a very popular part-time offer for home-educated students. Our students achieve well above national averages in their qualifications and win more national skills competitions than any other college in England. Our college is consistently rated good or outstanding by Ofsted. We're deeply proud of our students and determined to maintain and grow this level of vocational and specialist provision for current and future generations. It's imperative not just for the individuals who attend our college, but also for industry and community partners who rely on us to supply well-qualified employees. So the college remains essential to improving economic prosperity in the area and supporting social mobility, especially for those facing high levels of deprivation. As our chair said, FE funding over the last few years has been woefully inadequate. Since I've been principal, we've seen a 30% reduction in our level of funding. In particular, capital funding to improve existing facilities is frankly non-existent, and we have limited funding opportunities which tend to be focused on shiny new facilities like the LEP funding for the Myra Institute. Our Nuneaton campus desperately needs modernising and improving. We have no funding to support this. Many of our campus buildings, including the majority of engineering and our 4-storey building, were built in the 1950s and are now unfit for the training needs of today's students. Students are not benefiting as fully as they can from industry standard learning environments and digital capabilities to best prepare them for the increasing automation of so many jobs. We're also busy preparing for the introduction of T-levels, and while there is some capital funding associated with this programme, it will be insufficient to make the necessary improvements. So it is imperative that we generate the cash to improve the learning environment for our students. thus enabling us to sustain high-quality FE provision at the heart of this important community, while also retaining sufficient capacity for future growth of post-16 students. The floor space is available currently at the college. What we don't have is the funding to fit it out for today's learning requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any points of clarification? Councillor Wilson.
About, I think you said about 4,000 Nuneaton students. Have you forecast into the future what your expected student roll number will be? What is that and how far ahead does that go to?
Along with the demographics, and we use Warwickshire County Council's demographics to forecast. So we forecast for steady growth starting from next year on. This year, as you probably know, we're at the dip of a demographic decline of 16 plus year olds. So we're up currently in our current buildings, and bear in mind this application isn't taking any building space out, it's surrounding land. We're at 50% of capacity, so we could double our student numbers and still remain still manage to deliver. So that's the fact.
Sorry. You didn't answer my actual question, which was how far ahead have you forecast and what that number is?
And forecast 5 to 10 years ahead. The number, I haven't got the infinite number because it's so hard to forecast, especially with new educational provision, but we have capacity to double our numbers.
A point, Councillor.
Well, it's further on to that point. Forecast, have you taken into account the forecast changes from the borough plan here, the local plan from North Warwickshire Borough Council, which will also impact, and also the Leicestershire colleges, which will also have an impact?
Across our 5 campuses, so for the Leicestershire numbers, we forecast in line with Leicestershire County Council's demographic statistics. So that's forecast because that serves a very local group of post-16-year-olds who won't travel to Nuneaton. So, and vice versa, Nuneaton students won't travel to Wigston campus. So they're very discrete communities. So for each campus, Myra is an adult campus, so let's forget that one. Hinkley and Nuneaton, which are the 2 campuses that students from this community study at, but significant majority study at Nuneaton. We have forecast our numbers in line with the best data which we've secured from Warwickshire County Council.
Anything to come back on from anything that's arisen?
Just to make it clear that even though I did show, here we go, the master plan, that is purely indicative. All members are considering is the principle of residential development on that site with the proposed access. The plan you see in front of you is just an illustration. We're not considering those actual proposals.
Yeah, thanks for that, because I did hear somebody mention about flats, and I thought, well, it's only an outline, we haven't got any detail, so. Okay then, to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation, which is to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed? Is that seconded? Any member? Councillor Wilson.
Looking at this application, and I've only had a chance really to read the papers today because I've been away, but there are a couple of things which are surprising to me within the report. For a start, on page 17 of the report, we have relevant planning policies, and it goes on about the borough plan and the relevant policy numbers there. Not one of those policies mentions HSG1. And whilst it is outside of HSG1, it will, and HSG is the elephant in the room with this entire application. I've loaded up the map for HSG1. This application is quite clearly outside the boundaries of HSG1. And those of us who have fought many, many battles and have many, many scars over the borough plan, one of the things we were consistently told throughout the borough plan process was that once we have a borough plan in place, we have sites selected, and many of us have had arguments over the sites, that once you have those sites in place, you have a defensible reason for refusing applications which are not within the HSG sites. Chair? Chair, this is the first test of that borough plan, and Chair, I believe it meets the test for refusing any development on this site. Also, I think we need to bear in mind the planning inspector's report, which many of us pored over when it came out April, May time. Paragraphs 40 and 41, I had to look this up because I'd made notes some time ago, but paragraphs 40 and 41 of the inspector's report says that any more development within this locality would be unsustainable and is already dependent on maximum delivery rates. That is the existing 4,500 houses, not including this proposal for 200 houses here. Furthermore, the report says at paragraph 184, we have a 5.4-year guaranteed housing land supply. We are not in the position where we have to accept housing because we don't have the legal 5-year housing land supply. Again, this is another reason in my book for refusal. We don't need it, we don't want it, we don't have to have it. If we are serious about giving messages to our residents that this policy is defensible, it protects us against unwanted development, then I believe that we should refuse it. If the applicant doesn't like it, they can take us to appeal and let the inspector decide, because it is the inspector who has made these rulings in his report, and they should be challenged by another inspector and not open to speculative development in this way. Because once we lose this land, the college, whatever it may say, will not have the opportunity to build new developments to cater for whatever it might be. Because you never know, for example, you might have to build another building while you decamp into that to refurbish other things and so on and so forth. Our borough plan takes us to 2031 and beyond. I am not convinced from the answers I have had tonight that the numbers and the forecasts are as robust to take us to 2031 and beyond. Once this is gone, it is gone. But if the committee is minded to approve, I will not be voting to approve tonight, Chair, but if the committee is minded to approve, I believe that we must give some protection to residents, and we should insist on a condition that before development is allowed to proceed, that the new parking facilities, I believe it is supposed to be a multi-storey car parking facility, I may be wrong, but if that is to be approved, that should be put in first and foremost, because car parking is already an issue, and taking this land out will exacerbate that very issue for residents. So we should condition that before a single solitary foundation is laid for a house, they should deliver the goods on the car parking requirements. And also, I would suggest, possibly on the new pitch as well. But I believe we have serious, sustainable, strong reasons for refusal, and I'll be voting against, Chair.
Okay. Yeah, in regards to that, Councillor Wilson, you make a good point about including something in case it was approved. We don't know what's happening yet, but if it was or it was refused and it goes to appeal, then it's quite right. Now, I'm going to, before I move on to anybody else, I'm going to test the water on that. Is regardless of what the outcome is, are members happy to include the issue about the car parking coming before any development? Covers our backs to a degree then, doesn't it? I don't see any dissent, so that's okay to include that, yeah. Okay, so that'll be included in anything else. Okay, the recommendation is as printed, which is to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement, the conditions printed, and that additional thing proposed by Councillor Wilson. All those in favour of the recommendation? And against? think that's everybody, but I'll cover it. Any abstentions? Okay. So clearly the committee have voted against the officer recommendation. So in effect, we don't have anything on the table in front of us now. Councillor Wilson.
Refusal of the application on the basis that it falls outside of the strategic policy HSG1, that we have an existing 5-year housing land supply, and that the inspector has already said that any more development in this area would be unsustainable, as we're already dependent on maximum delivery rates, as per paragraphs 40 and 41 of the inspector's report.
That's why Claire's scribbling away there. Okay, you've got them all, yeah?
I would like to second that, Chair.
Okay then, any member want to speak on that? No. Is everybody clear on what's been proposed? It's been proposed and seconded refusal that it's not within HSG1 of the new local plan. The council does have a 5-year supply, and it's contrary to comments made by the planning inspector at the local plan team. Yep. Yes?
That's what Councillor Wilson said.
Are all those things, officers happy with those reasons for refusal?
It would probably be better not to specify which particular strategic allocation, that it's over and above all the strategic allocations in the local plan.
That's more defensible with that,
because it's not even contiguous with HSG1. The relation to the evidence in the inspector's report is more about evidence supporting those reasons for refusal, unless there's any specific technical reasons to add to the reason for refusal. At the moment, there wasn't any technical reasons to recommend the application for refusal, so without the backup of any of those at inquiry or appeal, it would be difficult to defend. But I think what you're saying was that the inspector said that there shouldn't be any further development to the north of Nuneaton. What we have to weigh that up against is the presumption in favour of sustainable development. So I think what I understood you were saying was you consider this not to be sustainable development because it's in the north of Nuneaton.
Yeah. If that is planning you speak for what I said, I'm happy with that.
Right, okay then. So there were those reasons that have been moved and seconded. There's just that slight variation in that it covers all of the housing,
it's over and above
the housing policies within the local plan. So, hang on, I ain't done my little chart yet. Okay, then, so is everybody clear on what they're voting on? So, all those in favour of those reasons for refusal? And against? And abstentions? Okay, then that's that's refused. The application's refused. Wendy, can you fetch Councillor Tandy back? I've got I've got it. Ian Duncan Smith. Forgive me throat. Ooh, I forgot that was.
Could I ask you to move along, please? Councillor Simons, you're not the vicar, you don't have to shake anybody's hand.
Okay, Claire, if we could move on to item number 2 then, please, which is School Lane Exhall.
This is an outline application for residential development of up to 150 dwellings. Access is also being considered at this stage. Objections from neighbouring properties have been received as detailed on the agenda, raising issues such as brownfield land should be used first, increased traffic, impact on highway safety, flooding, noise, impact on services such as doctors, hospitals and schools, and impact on wildlife. A petition has also been received as detailed on the agenda. The site forms part of the allocation for residential development under policy HSG 6 of the Borough Plan. The policy states that the overall site would provide at least 220 dwellings. So that on the plan on the left is the outline of the allocation in the Borough Plan, and on the right is the application site. Policy HSG 6 sets out the form of development which is to be accommodated on the site. A density of 50 dwellings per hectare should be provided, with lower densities concentrated along the new urban edges. The details would be considered under any reserve matters, but it is considered that this density can be met. The policy sets out the proposal should provide open space to the south of the site and maintain trees and hedgerows, and that there should be provision for a new cycle path link to Heckley Fields. This would be again considered under the reserve matters, but the illustrative master plan that has been submitted does indicate that these can be accommodated within the site. The proposal will also provide 25% affordable housing in compliance with Borough Plan policy. As part of assessing this strategic site for the Borough Plan, a landscaping assessment would have been carried out as part of that evidence base, and which concluded that the development of the site was acceptable in landscape terms. In line with policy NE5 of the Borough Plan on landscape character, a landscaping assessment has been submitted with the application. It has been found that the site is of high capacity for development, given the proximity of urban development. Overall, it is considered that there would be no significant harm on visual amenity or landscape character. In terms of residential amenity, the nearest properties are within School Lane, but set away from the site, and there are no concerns over the loss of residential amenity as a result of the development. All distance standards within the Council's adopted residential design guide can be more than met, but again will be assessed as part of any reserve matters application. A noise assessment has been submitted. This concludes that the dominant noise is from the road traffic from the M6 M6 slip roads and School Lane. And this could have an adverse impact on the proposed development if no mitigation was put in place. They concluded that noise from industrial units was also audible. Environmental Health considered that noise attenuation for the new dwellings can largely be made acceptable via conditions. This will also include a reassessment of noise from the adjoining industrial unit, which was previously a trampoline park, which is a subject of a new planning application currently being considered. This is included as condition 10. In relation to highway safety, a transport assessment has been submitted with the application, which concludes that the site is ideally located due to the site being well connected to the existing pedestrian and cycle network. The proposed access is to be off School Lane and is proposed to have a dropped curb. Trees will be trimmed back for access and include a 2-metre footpath to School Lane. County Highways have requested 3.5 metres in front of the site to be kept clear for future widening for footway, cycleway improvements in connection with the allocated employment site off Bowling Green Lane under policy EMP7 of the Borough Plan, which would be included in a legal agreement. The transport assessment looked at junction modelling on School Lane, Church Lane, Bowling Green Lane, the site access itself, Coventry Road, Bayton Road, Black Horse Road and Wilson's Lane. The impact was considered not to be significant. County Highways concluded that the assessment was robust and that the impact of the development could be mitigated on the highway network and would not provide a severe impact subject to conditions and 106 contributions. The contribution requests from Highways are £35,000 towards a zebra crossing for the walking route safest routes to school programme, £495,000 towards the implementation of highway improvements in the area on the Longford Road corridor, and £60,000 towards the implementation and improvement of a cycle and pedestrian routes, links and connections between the site and Bedworth Town Centre. In addition, £40,000 were also requested for the implementation and improvement of cycle and pedestrian routes, links and connections between the site and connections through to Bedworth through the Coventry cycle route. The applicant has agreed to pay all of these contributions. Highways England have no objection. They have pointed out that the final layout would be affected by noise, and they have requested a review of the noise impact assessment, including when the smart motorway is in operation, which again is covered under condition 10. Overall, it is considered that with the relevant conditions and obligations requested, there will be no significant harm on highway safety. In terms of ecology, at the request of County Ecology, intensive trial trenching has been carried out and an archaeological evaluation report submitted to record the findings. This illustrated some limited ridge and furrow, mainly post-medieval, and some agricultural systems. There was also some limited earlier features found possibly dating back between the 13th and 15th century. However, following this, the archaeological team at the county have no objections and do not require any further conditions. The site is entirely within flood zone 1, which is at least likely to flood. Due to soakaway testing on the site, this means that the site will have to retain water in a SUDS feature to the southeast of the site to provide discharge at greenfield runoff rates into the Severn Trent surface water drains. Excuse me. The man-made pond on the site is proposed to be retained. Both the Environment Agency and County Flood Risk Team have no objections subject to conditions. In relation to air quality, an air quality assessment has been submitted. This concludes that the overall effect of the development on human health is considered to be not significant subject to conditions. Environmental Health have no objection subject to conditions for a dust management plan for the construction phase and the fitting of electrical vehicle charging points and low emission boilers, which are all included on the agenda. In terms of ecology, the hedgerows are to be retained and enhanced on the site, and an existing pond is to be retained. Existing grassland is also proposed to be enhanced. A biodiversity impact assessment has been submitted, and it was proven that, subject to conditions, the site could be enhanced to provide a net gain. Various reports and ecological surveys have been submitted. It has been shown that there is low bat activity. Irrespective of this, a lighting condition has been added to ensure that new lighting does not affect bat roosts and their commuting or foraging routes. Other conditions, such as a biodiversity ecological management plan and a construction ecological management plan, and the provision of bat and bird bricks, have also been included. The application proposes open space to the sides, with the widest open space being to the south. The proposal includes the retention of the existing pond and provision of surface water attenuation basins. Parks have objected on the grounds that parts of the layout and master plan do not go far enough to show footpaths and cycleways to access the open space. However, as this is an outline application, officers consider that this issue could be conditioned. Parks have also requested that the play equipment was excluded within the site, as they considered it was inappropriate because of the presence of overhead wires running through the open space. However, the adopted Borough Plan Policy HSG 6 specifically states that the site should provide on-site play provision in the centre of the site, and it is considered that this policy should be adhered to. In terms of planning obligations, requests have been received from Parks, County Infrastructure, Sports Development, the NHS, the Police, County Highways, Sport England and George Eliot Hospital, which the applicant has agreed to pay. Some requests, such as welcome packs, new bus stops, public footpath improvements and library improvements, are not considered to be still compliant. The recommendation is therefore approval, subject to conditions and the completion of a legal agreement as detailed on the agenda and addendum. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Councillor Brown.
It's rare as a ward councillor that I get a planning application where there's more than 150 objections, so I'm here tonight as an advocate on behalf of those residents. I don't intend to go through all the various objections and about whether or not this site should or shouldn't be in the borough plan or in the green belt. You have your own opinions on that, but there's a number of concerns with this development. Traffic. School Lane is a road that suffers regularly, daily, from high levels of congestion at school times and at peak times. It's frequently congested along its full length, and there's only a footpath on one side of this road. The lights at the junction with Coventry Road do not have a pedestrian phase on them. And Warwickshire County Council figured this is not necessary because it will cost £250,000 to put that into the site. But children still have to get to the schools in the area. Yet we want them to go across a set of lights with no pedestrian function on them to get there. I'm concerned also that there's no provision in here for a formal crossing over from the development onto School Lane. As I say, there's only a pavement on one side of the road. We're going to have children and elderly people needing to cross the road on what's a busy road, and there's no cycle path, there's no footpath on the side of the development, and we regularly see children riding on the path there. I'm also concerned that there's in the assessment from the County Council, they deem that there's not necessarily any impact for bus routes on here. I'm regularly asked about why there isn't a bus route that goes down School Lane. We've got an old folks home there, lots of bungalows. We're going to add to the journeys by car, and yet there's no provision for bus routes. I think that needs to be thought about again. I note that the transport assessment on page 37 of the report was carried out in March 2018. Local residents group carried out their own assessment last year. This was deemed to be of sufficient quality to be included in the library of evidence for the borough plan. It showed vastly larger numbers of traffic using that road than was in the official assessment. So I would ask that a further assessment is carried out for traffic on this stretch of road before any approval is given to this. I would also ask that we condition or look to condition some sort of bus service being included and a crossing on School Lane. We then move to noise and air quality. We've already heard the M6 has been widened to bring the road even closer to the development. Now, it's great that we've got a provision for another assessment. I think that definitely needs to be done. As you see, the site's a wedge of land between the M6 and industrial estate, a busy road. We need to do something about this.
Thank you,
Let's think
Brown.
about it.
Thank you. Are there any points of clarification? Mr. Pearce.
Chair and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak today in support of the application before you. The proposed development is located on land that has been allocated on a strategic housing site in the Council's recently adopted Borough Plan under Policy HSG 6, a key difference between this application and the one that you've just previously considered. As such, the principle of residential development has been accepted as being appropriate on the site. The applicant is now seeking outline planning permission on part of the wider allocation for residential development up to 150 dwellings, along with the approval of the proposed access to the site. All other matters are reserved for future determination. A new priority junction is proposed onto School Lane, which the Highway Authority have confirmed as a safe and acceptable access arrangement for the site. In line with the adopted policy, it has been demonstrated that sufficient open space and children's play space can be accommodated on site, along with there being sufficient land for ecological mitigation works that will result in a net gain in biodiversity on site. A policy-compliant affordable housing contribution is proposed, with the size and tenure of units agreed with the Council's affordable housing officer, and which will be secured through a legal agreement. The illustrative layout has been submitted that demonstrates how the site can be laid out and which responds to the proximity of the motorway and the overhead power lines that run across the site. An adequate layout can therefore be achieved that will ensure that these do not impact on the residential immediacy of future residents. The Highway Authority have confirmed that the proposed development will not adversely affect the local highway network and have also sought a number of conditions towards local highway and cycling improvements, including a new footway on the south side of School Lane and a new pedestrian crossing on School Lane, which the applicant is willing to contribute to. All environmental and technical matters have been addressed, as evidenced through the officer's report to committee, and a set of appropriate conditions have been agreed to ensure that development can be implemented. As such, there are no outstanding issues that would prevent the delivery of the site. The site is therefore deliverable and will make a significant contribution to the provision of market and affordable housing in the borough. A number of other benefits will arise through the development through local construction jobs and increased demand and spend on local services, as well as improvements to existing public open space along with walking and cycling infrastructure in the local area. As such, the proposed development is considered to be wholly in accordance with the provisions of your recently adopted development plan, and as such, the support of the Council is sought through the grant of planning permission. Thank you.
Of clarification? No? Claire or Ben? I think you wanted to come back on something, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Just in some of the points that have been raised, on page 37 of your reports, councillors, you can clearly see that there are a number of contributions that have been requested. £35,000 has been requested for the provision of a zebra crossing across School Lane, which this development will be funding, and that was requested by the Safer Routes to School team, which the Highway Authority consults with when it undertakes its review of the planning application process. In addition, we're asking for a contribution towards the improvement of the B4113 Longford Road corridor, which includes the junctions which the local member had identified, and that's in accordance with the infrastructure development plan, which underpins the borough plan and sets out a number of junctions which require improvement to enable the allocated growth to come forward. So this is one site which is funding as alongside other sites, including the other allocations in that local area. In terms of bus services, the public transport team would have been consulted through the process. However, due to existing provision, they feel they can't provide anything further can't be required in this area due to the existing provision. They did request £21,000 for bus stop contributions, but they'd be too close to the existing bus stops, so it isn't considered still compliant because the existing bus stops are within 400 metres of the development. There is one other matter I'd like to just clarify, which is in the report it does say that the access will be a dropped curb. This is an error. It will be a full Bellmouth junction. subjected to Highway Authority standards. One final point. The residents' transport assessment that was submitted under the local plan, that wasn't submitted to the planning authority as part of the planning application. Therefore, the Highway Authority can't take it into consideration. We have to be independent and impartial when we look at planning applications, so we can only consider the information in front of us. However, if the local member or anyone else had submitted that information to us for us to have to consider to the local planning authority, the local planning authority would have asked us to consider it, but I don't believe that was undertaken.
Okay, thank you. Just for a move any further, was anything submitted? Okay. Okay, thank you. Again, to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation, which is to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed? Is that seconded? Any member? Councillor Graham.
That many more than 150 houses outside of the borough plan have already been granted planning permission over the last few years, and that since part of this site has been taken out, that needs to be taken into account because it was originally an allocation of nearly 300 houses. I'd also like to point out that Astley Lane counteracts this on its own, which was granted planning permission several years ago, so objecting to this would not have any implications on the borough's 5-year housing supply as it's being met through other means. Building here would mean that the meaningful Coventry-Exhall gap would be lost. And also, I heard references to a cycle network, but I'm not sure what existing cycle network this application is attached to. There's no lanes that I know of, and I doubt that people would want to cycle along Bowling Green Lane and nearby areas if EMP7 were to be given the go-ahead as well, which is part of the borough plan. And I'd also like to point out that consultation on this took place nearly a year and a half ago, and a lot has changed since then. And I've never seen a delay that long on something going before planning, so I'd like to question that. And also, we're going ahead with this potentially without the noise impact assessment being done, and it seems really bizarre that that hasn't happened, considering we've had a year and a half of this being delayed. And also there's a buffer zone within the borough plan for the A5, but it seems strange that there isn't one for the M6, especially considering the expansion of the M6 recently. Only one access point to this site, which is through School Lane, which is as a planning precedent, I find this unacceptable because many other sites this size have more than one access point as standard. And considering the high levels of traffic and speeding on School Lane, as evidenced by regular speed control patrols by the police, I'd also consider that to be unacceptable. There's only one way for construction traffic to enter the site, so I imagine it would be very challenging to get something in place that wouldn't leave dirt on the roads and wouldn't cause inconvenience for residents who are leaving towards a place like Cedars School, Baton Road Industrial Estate where they may work, or even Coventry where they may work or shop. Also, the Parks team have objected due to a lack of footpaths and cycleways being considered, and indeed the borough plan policy seems to be in contradiction to the Parks Department's own assessments. Site plans are going to consultation at the moment, so the policy should be decided before this is voted on. And I also cannot accept the caveat about conditions, as the Parks Department clearly don't accept these caveats as their objection stands. Usually, if they had reasons to believe that that objections could be caveated through conditions, then they'd drop their objection, but they have not. I believe that this application should be deferred while the SPD, as a strategic site, HSG 6, is ongoing. This hasn't been completed yet. So I think the time should also be used to have a new consultation on motorway noise due to the motorway being widened, and for the noise impact assessment to also be needed. So I'd like to suggest a deferral while the SPD consultation process carries on.
Any other member? Councillor Wilson.
I have reservations about approving an application which is currently subject to an outstanding consultation going ahead, because we don't know what's going to happen with the SPD consultation. I already know, for example, with my own, there is an error in one of the SPD documents going forward, which may or may not impact either on the result or the contributions which are made. So that would concern me greatly, that we're approving something whilst it's out to consultation. That could give the impression to residents that what is the point in completing a consultation if the decision has already been made. Now, it may or may not impact on it, I don't know, because I don't know what the outcome will be. But that could, if this goes ahead, give the impression, and I think it would be a very strong impression, actually, given this council's track record of consultations on the borough plan, give a perception that the outcome has been prejudiced because we've already made a decision. So I think it wouldn't be very good form for us to do so. I would also suggest that if there is this high-level quality survey which was conducted by the residents, I'm taking it on face value that it was deemed to be sufficiently robust as to be statistically significant for the inspector, that a deferral would also be in order for us as a council and a committee to ask Highways to run that data through whatever you have to run it through to see whether it makes an impact, whether there's a difference between what the applicant says and what this comes up with, I don't know. But if it has been deemed statistically significant for the inspector, I think we would be remiss if we don't take the opportunity as a committee to ask for those numbers to be run through, because there may be a difference. I don't know, because I haven't seen the data or seen any of it. But I wouldn't feel comfortable as a planning committee member making a decision, because I wouldn't, now that I've heard this information, I'm not necessarily sure I'm in possession of the full facts in order to make an informed decision about this application. So I would support the deferral pending the conclusion of the consultation, which I believe is sometime in December, something like that, and also for these figures to be run, if that would be acceptable to the mover of the recommendation, to have those numbers run through, because that does concern me, unless officers can tell me something completely different.
Okay. Exactly what we need clarifying, I think. Right, because there was the thing about, what was it, the SP6?
I can do that.
And then,
what we're out to consultation at the moment is the concept plans, supplementary planning document, which you're correct finishes on the 8th of December. Given that we will then have to analyse what any responses we get, it's not likely that that will be able to be reported back to Cabinet until January. And there has been some questions that shouldn't just go to Cabinet, but should also go to full council. So I wouldn't wish to delay this application until that time, because until the time that Cabinet or full council has adopted those SPDs, it is just a draft. So a decision made on the 10th of December, I think the committee is in December, is no different from a decision tonight, because it's still part and parcel of the consultation, till those consultation responses have been analysed and reported back to Cabinet. That's one thing to say, and that's again within your gift to defer it till that time if you want to. Do have to remind you that the applicant does have a right of appeal against non-determination. Given this is an allocation in a recently adopted local plan, they may well choose to go to that route. As regards the other two things, Astley Lane site was known about during the preparation of the local plan, and the numbers on that site are taken into account in the housing trajectory. Similarly, the inspector was well aware of the residents' information and did look at that as part of his deliberations on the site before he suggested that the site could go forward as an allocation in the local plan.
Okay, and Ben?
Just two points, Chair. Firstly, regarding the residents' information, it will be very difficult for you to justify extracting that information from the local plan examination library and then implementing it on this application. That's because it has been reviewed by a planning inspector for a different process for the development of the local plan and the development of the policy HSG6. So the inspector would have considered the evidence as part of his determination of the Borough Council's policy for HSG6 and the evidence that the Highway Authority provided during the examination and various other aspects. If you were to take it to appeal, it is likely, having seen it happen elsewhere, that the inspector will rule that against the local planning authority as being unfair and unreasonable in planning terms. That's just my advice and guidance to you in terms of that, so just so you're aware. In terms of what Councillor Grant said about the 1 point of access, unfortunately he's slightly mistaken. The Highway Authority has a standard that a development of 200 homes requires multiple points of access. 150 can be accepted off 1 point of access. If required, the Highway Authority will have to look at an emergency access. In this case, it wasn't felt it was necessary in this case at this location.
Okay, thank you for that. That helped. Just before I bring other members in, before I forget what I was going to ask, I've got a couple of things myself. We've got that old chestnut, what none of us really like, is about an outline application. But I wanted to ask about the noise mitigation from the motorway, because clearly it's very close to it. And will any design for that come back in detail when the detailed thing comes back?
Yeah, I think that's what the Highways Agency are saying at the moment. What they're saying is it is possible to have residential properties there. What mitigation is requires further detailed noise assessment when the smart motorway has been opened, which I believe is still ongoing and isn't likely to open until the beginning of next year.
Yeah.
But I can't guarantee that was the date for it. Certainly when I've driven along it looks as if the works are still ongoing. So what would happen is before any details or reserve matters application, they would have to do that noise assessment, and the mitigation then would form part of that application. So be it whether they had no windows opening on the side of the motorway, or triple glazing or whatever, or noise baffling, fencing along it, all of that would have to be put forward as mitigation. So Highways Agency aren't saying that houses can't go there, but they're not clear what mitigation would be required until the noise assessment has been done once the smart motorway is working.
Okay, thank you. My other concern was the concerns from our parks people. And I can kind of understand that being underneath all those lines that run across, and over the years we've had various advice given to us about that. Clearly you can't develop under that corridor, as we found out. It's pity Jim Foster's gone, he might have been able to help us with it. But again, as it's an outline, I'm thinking on the lines of there's maybe an opportunity to discuss more with the parks people about the type of play equipment, if it is equipment, because I think you could possibly put something more natural in than the normal type thing. So is that again something we can get back at the detail?
Yep.
Assuming that you will talk to your colleagues in parks about that. Yeah, okay then. I saw Councillor Lloyd and Councillor Pandare, I think. Councillor Lloyd.
You covered the parks issue and the motorway issue that was going to talk about, which can be, officers are saying I'll be overcoming the detailed stage. One thing that does concern me, well, there's a couple of things that concern me and always have in this area. One's traffic. Anybody that lives there locally that uses that road at between 7:30 and 9 o'clock in the morning knows to avoid it and avoid it like the plague. That's why I find it very difficult that the Highway Authority have said basically it can be mitigated by the other development, which is the one in Bowling Green Lane, and partially this particular development. I find that difficult to see, but you know, that's just me, and I know because the Highway Authority haven't objected on it, it's not a reason for refusal of an application, and I accept that. But I find it very, very difficult to understand You know, with the amount of traffic that goes up there, why the Highway Authority haven't done more. The consultations, I think, have been covered. I'll find it very difficult to go along with what has been suggested on deferral until a later stage, having listened to what has been said by officers. On the parks and the other issues of the motorway, well, on the parks, yes, it can be overcome within the detailed stage, as has been suggested by officers. On the highway, on the motorway, well, not my cup of tea. I wouldn't like to live right next to a motorway, I've got to be honest. And if you travel the M6 as regular as what I used to, or even if you just travel from Bedworth to Coventry on the M6, there's a number of very large developments on the Coventry side of the border where the houses come virtually right up to the motorway. And I suppose what they've done is to help with the noise control, has put those massive wooden boards in all the way up the motorway. So I think, you know, when the consultation is done with the highway authorities and the, I don't know what it is, the motorway, the highway agency, that that's the type of thing I would assume that, not anticipating the outcome of that consultation, but I would assume that's what they would be suggesting, because that is what's been put in place all the way up the motorway from Coventry to Birmingham. So I've got difficulties voting against this application, even though I know what the traffic situation is locally, especially with Warwickshire County Council, who are the highway authority, not putting any objections in. I think it would be suicide if we objected or deferred this application that included that part of it.
Councillor Pandey.
Most of the objection has been covered by Councillor Brown, Councillor Gran and also Councillor Longden. And I got still a problem with the school lane, and there was contribution was £495,000 for mostly for Coventry Road. There's nothing for school lane where the entrance is going to be. There's only one zebra crossing. It might help, but it won't eliminate the problem, because the children coming from Hawkesbury village, they have to go to Ash Green School, and they have to go to Cedar School, Giles School. So they won't be covered by that just for crossing. So that's why I have still problem with the school lane, and like 150 houses, that might be 300 cars, if 2 or 3 cars every house. So another adding 300-400 cars on the school lane, it will be causing problem, and they're not going to widen that. No money has been put for a school lane where the problem is. That's my concern. That's why we are asking to defer this for the until further after the what they are going to do in the future. You know, so then we can bring back this application. And again, about the noise control on the motorway. I know many people living in the Cedar States, so they are quite far away from they are having a problem. They was complaining about noise. You know, they said they can hear noise during night time. Many houses I went there, and if you are making more houses next to motorway, although at the time of the consultation that was said, you know, they were going to triple glaze or something, and somebody jokingly said that you are not going to triple glaze the garden where the people are going to sit in the Sunday or sunny days. And same if there are hot weather, you have to open the window So then although you have to put the air conditioning inside, not to open the windows, so get the noise from the motorway. So there is some concern near the motorway and also school end. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, most in the town centre, and I can hear the motorway noise at times, but that is how sound travels at times. I don't hear it all the time, but sometimes I do. I was a little bit confused about the comments about people coming from Hawkesbury Village and that, because the proposed zebra crossing, as I understand it, is to really service this new development. People coming from them other areas wouldn't need to use that because it would take them into the development, not where they're going. And there's only, it was mentioned earlier on by somebody about having to go across the traffic light junction to get to schools. Well, there's only one school on the other side of Country Road, and that's Cedars Infants. And that can be accessed up Country Road and by the lollipop lady at the top. So, Councillor Watkins.
Quite happy to go along with officers' recommendations, and happy that county have put in enough recommendations for road safety. But I was just wondering if at this point we would be able to take into the consideration of what the parks have asked for, and the indicative layout and master plan do not go far enough to show footpaths and cycleways to access the open space. And officers have asked for that to be conditioned. Can we add that in now so that we don't have to worry about it later? And if we can, I'm quite happy to go ahead with that recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah,
Right, okay. I just want to take a little bit of advice, actually, because normally what I would do is take the vote on the recommendation, and if it was lost, come back to your... I saw them as reasons for refusal, really. But it was moved to deferment and seconded, so shall I take that as it... Okay, all right, so we'll do that. It was moved and seconded deferment of the application in regard to the, what is it, SP6? SPD, sorry, not completed, that's not been completed, and the sorry, remind me because I forgot.
It was the residents' traffic.
Oh, yeah, I'd got extra cars I wrote down, but the yeah, okay, yeah. Right, so is everybody okay with those reasons? Yeah. So we're voting on the deferment. All those in favour to defer the application? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. To defer. Hang on. And against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So on my casting vote, that fails. Which then takes us on to the recommendation which has been moved and seconded, which is to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed, and the thing that Councillor Watkins suggested about the cycle routes and officers talking to Parks Department. All those in favour of that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And and against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, so on the casting vote, that's approved. Right. Which then takes us on to 35. I'm not sure how it said. Is it Cleveley or Cleveley? Cleveley Drive.
This application is for a single-storey rear extension following the demolition of the existing garage to the rear. The existing garage is shown there in blue. It would be 5.6 metres wide across the rear elevation and project 6 metres out from the back. The height to the eaves is 2.3 metres and 4 metres to the ridge. The carport to the side of the property, which is located there, is to be retained. It is being reported to committee at the request of Councillor Hocking. A letter of objection has been received relating to the size of the extension, the proximity to the neighbouring property, the impact on carrying out maintenance and flooding and drainage. Issues such as maintenance are private matters, and the comments raised regarding drainage are usually covered by building regulations. In terms of the impact on number 37, which is that property there, and that property shown there in the photograph, the proposed extension does not infringe the 60-degree guideline to the ground floor habitable room within the property, in compliance with the Residential Design Guide. At present, the existing garage, number 35, does infringe that guideline. However, that is to be demolished, and the extension will actually move further away from the rear of the house at number 37, meaning there will be no infringement of the 60-degree line. There are no side windows proposed on the extension, on the elevation facing that property. In relation to number 33, on that side, this has a single-storey extension to the rear which cannot be protected as it's not original. As the proposed extension is single-storey, there are no concerns regarding overlooking. As the extension is to the rear, it would not be visible in the street scene or from public areas. The design is considered acceptable. The majority of the extension is to be rendered apart from the side elevation which faces number 33. The rendering itself doesn't match the existing property, but as it's to the rear, this is considered acceptable. The recommendation is therefore approval, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Just before I move on to the speakers, I should have said at the start, I was contacted, in fact he visited my house, I think it's Mr Treadwell that's down, so. Okay, first speaker is Mr Treadwell.
I'm glad that this will be refused on the basis of the close proximity to my property, and it is my boundary, and if it is to be adhered to, then I would like it to be reduced to 3 metres, as at a property below, number 1, was refused last year on the same basis, and that was reduced to 3 metres by 3 metres. And also, he built a garage. He did it with our planning permission, and he took the gutters away, and with all this rain, he's also put gravel into the garden. And all that rain gives about a foot of water onto my property. And it's disgusting. I don't like the idea of it, and he don't talk to you, other than to speak sometimes when he comes by. And they've had a digger in the garden doing various things to the pots and everything. And as regards the structure, the internal walls, there's 2 internal walls out, and this proposition is to take the outside wall out. And that's on where the window, the supports is where the window was, and we're bricked in. That to me seemed wrong. Also, the fact of the property itself, he had it reduced for the same as the garage that was proposed to be in the 60-degree development for number 37, and he's already took it down. Never mind that proposed to take it down, he's already took it down. And also, the property boundary is my boundary. And there's also a question of when you do any extractions or anything nearby, excavation, there's a 3 metre rule adhered to. I don't see any proposition for that.
Okay, have you done, Mr. Treadwell? Okay, thank you very much. Are there any points of clarification? No, thank you. John Watts. Do you want to press your button, Mr. Watts? It's the big button in front of you.
40 years since I've done best on speak. To speak tonight. I'm acting as agent for Mr. Laidler. The proposed extension is offset from the boundary of number 33. It basically to give the ability to get the foundations and the wall and the roof structure all within the boundaries and the confines of the development site. As for the size and the scale of the property, the extension, there is an extension already to the rear of number 33 which extends 4.5 metres beyond the back line of the original house. Beyond that is another 2.5 metres of fence which is 2.3 metres high, which is the proposed height of the eaves on the proposed development. Size and appearance of the property, yeah, okay, it is a big extension, there is no denying that, but it is still considerably smaller than a lot of extensions previously approved and built along Cleverley Drive. There is a concern of maintenance on the property. The wall facing the neighbouring plot of number 33 will be constructed in facing brickwork and should remain free of maintenance requirements for at least 50 years, as the original house has. The roof, fascias, gutters, all that side are all UPVC and again should remain maintenance free. With respect to any outstanding maintenance or preventative maintenance on the boundary wall, which is the extension of number 33, the applicant is more than willing to allow a window of opportunity between now and Christmas for the owner to repoint that or do whatever works is considered necessary. In respect of the flooding that was raised as a concern, the common drain that passes across the site, the old clay drain, which is 80 years old, will be completely stripped out between the boundaries and replaced by a seamless plastic drain, bedded and encased in concrete to alleviate any future problems. It will have access points for rodding, etc. The ground slopes away from the house and the additional catchment for rainwater is only 16 square metres. That potentially could go into a soak-away in the garden, but it is on heavy clay and it's unlikely that it would pass a soak-away test. Water from the roof next door discharges straight onto the ground and that does come through the fence and leave a wet ground anyway. And with these points in mind, bearing in mind that it is fully compliant with every planning guideline and schedule, I would ask that you look favourably on this application. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Watts. Any points of clarification? Lloyd.
So about the footings, are the footings going to be within your boundary? I.e., is it right on the boundary or is it inside the boundary? And will the guttering be on your side?
Yeah.
The wall itself is set 350 millimetres back from the wall. The foundations will only project 150 mil from the wall and the gutter projects 200 mil, so everything is on the site.
Okay. Right, the guttering and any water going over next door. But you're saying that won't happen?
No, it shows on the elevation.
Okay. Right, any other points of clarification? Claire, anything to come back on at the moment? No? Right, in that case, to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation which is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed? That's seconded. Any member wish to speak? No? In that case, the recommendation is as how I've just read it out. All those in favour of that? Somebody gone? 3, 6, no, sorry. Okay, so that's approved unanimously. Which then takes us on to our Last item of the evening. The 29 Mercer's Meadow. And just, this is all in the spirit of friendliness, don't get me wrong. You're all right, Mr. Councillor Pandey, you can hear what I'm going to say. Just so there's no technical arguments afterwards, I'm assuming that where it says applicant, Mr. and Mrs. Pandey, that should read Pandey. It's been rectified. And the only other thing, and it might be me that's wrong, where it says background, it's been reported to committee as one of the applicants is a ward councillor. I don't believe he's a ward councillor for that area. He represents Poplar, not Exhall. So, but I think it comes under his county boundary. Doesn't it? Oh, right. Oh, okay.
It's just because he's a councillor.
It's been rectified again on the addendum.
But it's
Oh, has it? Sorry, I haven't had a chance to look at the addendum. Oh, it caught me out, haven't you?
No, it's not. It's not.
Okay.
Make it clear.
Well done. Right, Claire.
Right, this application is for a first floor extension to the side at 29 Mercer's Meadow. It will be set back from the existing front elevation by 800 mil. It will project off the original side elevation by 3.3 metres, go the remaining length of the house and then project along the rear by 3.2 metres, giving a total length of 10.8 metres. The main roof to the front will have a ridge height of 7.7 metres, so that's that element there. And the secondary roof to the rear, this part here, will have a ridge height of 6.6 metres. It would be built over a single-storey extension added in 2009, and that's that outline there showing that existing extension. It has been reported to committee as one of the applicants is a councillor. Number 27 Mercer's Meadow, which is that property there, is the unattached neighbour to the east and on the opposite boundary to that of the extension. This means that there will be no impact on any original windows to habitable rooms. The rear section of the extension, to this part here, does contain a side-facing window serving a bedroom, which will look across that way. However, there is a separation distance between the window and the boundary of 8.3 metres, which does comply with the residential design guide. And the view is also over the roof of the rear extension added in 2009 to that section there. Therefore, it is not considered there will be any significant impact on the rear garden of 27 and no detrimental impact on the property. Number 31 Mercer's Meadow on the other side is the unattached neighbour to the west and has a totally blank elevation facing number 29. Also, it is separated from 29 by the 10-metre wide walkway to the industrial estate to the rear, to this element here, which takes you through to Prologis Park. As a result, there is no impact on any original windows to habitable rooms or on the rear garden. And distance standards are also met in relation to number 14 opposite. The extension to the side will be visible in the street scene and fairly prominent, particularly when approached from the west past number 31 Mercer's Meadow. This is because immediately adjacent to the western side of the property is a public footpath. We can just see in that photograph there. However, at the moment, because of the way number 29 and 31 relate to each other, the existing side wall of 29 is already very prominent in the street scene. It is considered that the extension would not significantly change the situation and would result in a similar relationship to the boundary that number 1 has with its own boundary. The impact when approached from the east is not as great as it's shielded to a certain extent from the existing house, so coming from that way. The extension is, in general terms, sympathetic to the original house and therefore acceptable in design terms. The extension would also be set back from the footpath by 6 metres. Officers therefore consider that the extension would not detract from the character of the area, appear intrusive or dominate the existing property. The recommendation is therefore approval, subject to conditions, as detailed on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Can I move the recommendation, which is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed? Is that seconded? Any member wish to speak? No? All those in favour of the recommendation? That's unanimous, thank you. That completes the business. Thank you very much for your attendance and declare the meeting closed.